Do you want to see one of the worst answers I've ever heard in politics? That's what I have for you here in a moment. Of course, Donald Trump has selected as his defense secretary nominee Pete Hegseth, who we know Trump picked because he saw him on Fox and Friends weekends. Couldn't even get a main Fox and Friends host. And Pete Hegseth does have a military record, but isn't exactly the type of person you'd expect to be the Secretary of Defense, top of the most powerful military in the world. And one of the controversies that have come up with a lot of the nominees, honestly, but obviously Gates most prominently, and then now Pete Hegseth, are these sexual misconduct allegations. For Hegseth, it's a sexual assault allegation that he, quote unquote, resolved by paying the woman who accused him off. And he was asked about this. And watch this video and think to yourself, as someone who hasn't sexually assaulted anyone, how would I answer such a question? And contrast that against how Hegseth answered the question. Here we go.
We take absolutely nothing for granted, and we welcome the opportunity to talk to any senator that wants to talk to us.
Did you sexually assault a woman in Monterey, California?
I have, as far as the media is concerned, I'll keep this very simple. The matter was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you very much.
We have a lot more to talk about, but to do so, I want to bring in Josiah from Pondering Politics. Great to be with you, Josiah. I haven't collabed with you since a traumatic night, election night. It is good to see you, even though
Likewise.
Your face reminds me of a bad night.
I hear that, unfortunately, from so many friends and family members. I'm stunned to hear it from you. But yeah, I mean, we had to take a bit of a break to cope separately from the traumatic night that was election night. But yeah, man, I'm excited to be back with you and looking forward to regular collaborations in the future.
It appears that's also something that has been said about Pete Hegseth's face. He there gets asked, did you sexually assault a woman in California? If someone asked me that, I would go, no, of course not. What are you talking about? His answer is, I have, as far as the media is concerned, it's very simple. The matter was fully investigated and I was completely cleared. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Now, I want to get to in a second Trump's reaction to this blindsiding him a little bit. Apparently they're looking into Pete Hegseth didn't turn up this story, and so Trump feels blindsided by it. But first, I'd love to get your reaction, Josiah, to that answer. And second, what is this issue with Trump nominating so many people with these sorts of skeletons?
So Pete Hegseth is disastrously unqualified to be the Secretary of Defense for reasons we'll get into. To say, I mean, obviously there's the lack of administrative and experiential background, but there's also the moral qualifications as well. And so to a question posed like that, the answer should be an emphatic no, as you said. Instead, he gave a very legalese, disclaimer that he almost had to read off a cue card. As far as the media is concerned, this matter is closed. And the thing is, it should shock the sensibilities of anyone watching. And certainly even Trump supporters and Republicans. Remember, the Republicans for decades have branded themselves the party of Christ and the party of family values and the party of personal accountability. And here you have Pete Hegseth simultaneously violating all three of these principles in real time. The thing is, I'm not sure it's going to make much of a difference. As a matter of fact, you see many prominent MAGA influencers and MAGA Republicans doubling down on their support for Pete Hegseth, even after this disastrous question and disastrous answer, the call and response thing, even after it went viral. And of course, I would argue that much of the reason of that is that the leader of the Republican Party, the man who nominated Hegseth in the first place, Donald Trump, is an adjudicated rapist. He was found liable for sexual abuse and defamation by a New York court, a civil court, just last year. and was ordered to pay tens of millions of dollars. And the presiding judge clarified when Trump's attorneys attempted to have it thrown out that as far as the public is concerned, in terms of colloquial words and expressions, Donald Trump raped E. Jean Carroll. And yet the Republican Party, unfortunately, doesn't care at all. And you actually had prominent Republicans like Elise Stefanik, for example, and Nancy Mace double down on their support for Trump. And so if that's the very leader of the party, a person who's supposed to be a paragon of whatever the party represents, why on earth will Republicans, or should Republicans, care about what Pete Hegseth did and how he answered that question? That's the world we're in, Luke. That's where we are.
I guess the simple answer is birds of a feather stick together. And that's disturbing when we're talking about sexual assault. Apparently, too, Mediaite reports that Trump insiders say President-elect was misled by Gates and Hegseth about past scandals. Just quickly, a little excerpt from this President-elect Donald Trump was misled by cabinet nominees Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth about the extent of the misconduct allegations against them, according to several sources who spoke with Mediaite. One source granted anonymity in order to speak candidly about internal deliberations, said the House Ethics Committee report on the allegations against Gates was a major blow to his chances. This is before he actually withdrew as Trump's nominee to run the Justice Department, given its contents were far more damning than Gates had led the president-elect to believe. And apparently a similar story with Hegseth. I went through the particulars of what those allegations against Hegseth are in a past segment, but in both, it's not a situation where there's just zero evidence, or the way that Hegseth wants people to portray it. It was fully investigated and he was cleared. There's a difference between you being cleared, nothing valid about the allegation, versus authorities decide, all right, we're not confident enough that we could bring this to a successful prosecution. And the answer there, I think, tells us all that we need to know. I would love to hear from you, Josiah, your response to if it's true that, yeah, Trump actually having his allegation, one of his many, litigated in front of a jury and him found liable. Why would it be that that's acceptable to the Republican Party and to Donald Trump, but Gates and his allegations caused him to withdraw the nomination?
Yeah, so it's interesting. You point out the kind of catch-22 that Republicans are in, or rather they would be in if they cared about principle and they cared about consistency, and quite frankly, if voters cared about it as well. One of the things that I've been saying on my show is not to necessarily finger wag at voters, but the fact of the matter is we all have culpability in this process, candidates, parties, voters as well, the American people. And the American people decided in the 2024 election that they didn't particularly care about Donald Trump's many horrendous transgressions. And so this would be a catch-22 in a more rational world, which is like, okay, so this idea that you don't want to reward, so Republican senators rather, who are squeamish about a Matt Gaetz or a Pete Hegseth because of these allegations, which are credible. They have not been proven in a court of law, to your point, but Hegseth is lying when he says he's been cleared. To your point, when prosecutors decline to bring charges, that's not necessarily exoneration, much as it was with Matt Gaetz. The Justice Department declined to bring charges against Matt Gaetz. He said that was proof that he was innocent. No, it's just all it is necessarily proof that they weren't necessarily confident that they could prove the case beyond all reasonable doubt. But again, going back to your point, which is you all have embraced Donald Trump as your political leader. Perhaps you didn't vote for him, but you referred him as President Trump. I'm so happy to work with Donald Trump and President Trump's agenda. You are falling in line behind him, he who wields more power and responsibility than even the Secretary of Defense. But you're holding a subordinate to a higher standard, potentially, than the man himself. But the thing is, Luke, we don't know. I mean, Matt Gaetz withdrew his name purportedly because 4 Republican senators indicated that they would not vote for him. We don't know what will happen with Hegseth. You got to remember that Republican senators also have limited political capital. It's not just Trump. And given that the Republican Party, or at least the meat of it, is indeed a cult of personality, these Republican senators probably have to be very careful about which nominees of Donald Trump they rebuke, right? So it's possible that the Republicans go, you know what, we did accept this for Trump, so I guess we should just go ahead and accept this for Hegseth because clearly the American people don't care. That's the situation that we're in. It would be a catch-22 in a rational world, but we're not living in a rational world at all.
We're not. And on to another clip related to this subject. Republican Senator Mike Rounds appeared with Caitlin Collins, and I want to play some of that questioning for you.
Well, Senator, on that, there was another pick up on the Hill today, Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick to be the Pentagon chief. Does the sexual assault allegation, which Hegseth has denied, but which was laid out in a 22-page police report today, does that give you any pause about voting to confirm him?
I haven't met him yet. I have not visited with him. And so he kind of falls into the same category as Pam does. This is a case of where the president has the opportunity to make that nomination. He gets the benefit of the doubt. And then I want an opportunity to visit with Pete. I want to visit with him, see what his thoughts are, how he would handle the department. He's going to have to answer those questions with regard to anything that's in his record. And so, yeah, he's going to have to be able to walk on in, sit down, and to visit with people, explain what's going on. And that's the way this process works. We're not going to find people that are going to walk in and nobody's going to ask them questions about their background or anything else that may have been questionable. So all of them know when they walk in, their background is going to be scrutinized, and they're going to have to be prepared to answer those questions. So it'll be interesting to see how each of them respond. And all of that is shared from member to member. So both Republicans and Democrats get to do it. And, you know, they're all going to talk among themselves. We're a lot closer than a lot of people realize up here. And that discussion will go on.
I just asked because I know, you've co-sponsored legislation in the past to deal with sexual assault in the military, as that's been a big issue. I know how important that is to you. So, Senator, we'll see how that process plays out.
Josiah, I'm getting so exhausted. By the way, Trump knows you can pick people who don't have these allegations. A lot of times when it's talked about, you have a response that alludes to a faulty notion that, well, everyone has sort of crazy things in their background like this, so you're going to have to answer for it. No, not really. You can pick high character people. I don't remember Biden when he was picking his cabinet and staffing his administration, him having this issue with one person after another being caught up in these sorts of scandals. Yeah,
I mean, I made a comment that on Twitter that alluding to the idea that at this point it's almost seen as a feature and not a bug with Trump nominees. Like, I wonder if it's on the checklist that Trump is looking for camaraderie with his fellow nominees by that being on the list of criteria. I mean, it's categorically absurd, but again, it's nothing new. I just want to say before we address what Senator Rounds had to say, you got to go back to 2018 when Brett Kavanaugh was nominated to be on the Supreme Court of the United States. So he had been credibly accused of sexual misconduct as well. The Republicans permitted the key accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, to appear in front of the Senate. It was harrowing, emotional testimony, and Republicans at least publicly expressed sympathy and empathy for what she experienced. And then they doubled down on Kavanaugh anyway and then confirmed him. And the frustration for a lot of Democrats was not that Trump didn't have the right to appoint a conservative Supreme Court justice. We recognize that when there are vacancies on the Supreme Court, the sitting president gets the right to nominate, and then the Senate advises and consents. Now, they don't believe it when it's convenient, but that's a separate issue. The issue was, okay, he'd been credibly accused, and given that there are dozens, hundreds, perhaps thousands of qualified conservative judges that you could have nominated to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States who effectively share all of Kavanaugh's views but none of the baggage, why the hell would you double down on this particular person? It was seen and interpreted as a slap in the face, not only to own the libs, but also like to own the girls, own women, right? Like giving them a giant middle finger. And so that was 6 years ago. So flash forward, and we're seeing one cabinet candidate after another. And again, it just seems more at this point like a feature instead of a bug. The thing I'll say about Mike Rounds is that was a really disappointing and predictably cowardly response from a sitting Republican senator. And Caitlin Collins was right to be, to raise an eyebrow at this, because it would have even been like, Luke, this is how sad I have lowered the bar. I would have at least been somewhat satisfied That's how sad this is. If Mike Rounds had at least vocalized, like, these allegations are disturbing, and so I expect that Pete Hegseth, if he wants to move forward, he's going to have to answer questions and satisfy my concerns. He didn't even say that. He just said, he's going to be asked questions and he's going to have to answer. He didn't express any concern whatsoever. And this is a man who has sponsored legislation, seeking to, crack down on sexual misconduct. Where's the principle?
So often we come to the conclusion that it's absent with these folks. Just one miscellaneous thing I want to get your take on. Josiah, there is a little Twitter discussion going on because you have it being reported that Comcast is putting MSNBC up for sale. And Donald Trump Jr. responded to this saying, "Hey, Elon Musk, I have the funniest idea ever." And Elon Musk responded saying, "How much does it cost?" And this connects to something I've been following on the show, Josiah, which is the right celebrating Elon Musk becoming, as it once was described, the right's George Soros. And they create these conspiracy theories and often lies and this perception about what the left's up to, so that they can then justify doing things that we're not actually doing. We don't have billionaires who will come in, buy platforms, completely leverage them in the interest of our candidate, and help to censor stories for that candidate, and then dump $1 million a day, potentially illegally, into the campaign to help that candidate, and then use their massive public profile to help that candidate and overtly go to Trump rallies to help that. That's not something that we have, but they think we do. So then they say, oh, well, that's why we need our own. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about this, saying, it's great that now we have one billionaire, but they've had billionaires for a long time. It's all so confusing what their mindset is. But what we're seeing is then MAGA threaten any Republicans that will stand in Trump's way, saying Elon Musk is prepared to fund single-handedly primary races against you and defeat you with that money. And so Elon Musk has become an enforcer for the cult of personality that is Trump in a really scary way. And then imagine, and this is a lot for you to respond to, I understand, but then imagine if George Soros purchased Fox News and made it left-wing, the MAGA reaction. Now everything's rigged. This is the deep state. They've come after us. They hate free speech, etc. And you think MSNBC would stay the same if Elon Musk bought it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And so it's funny, I told you before we started recording that I mentioned this particular story because I actually recorded a rough draft of a video discussing this yesterday, and for technical reasons I had to scrap it, so I'm going to have to re-record it today. But it's like you listened to this rough draft video verbatim. You raised basically every concern that I did, which is, number one, every accusation is a confession with the Republican Party. What they say about George Soros is simply not true, but Elon Musk embodies the very sort of qualities that they project onto George Soros and the Democratic Party, number one. Number two, everything is about owning the libs. There is no principle. They will say one thing on Monday, completely contradict themselves on Tuesday, and have forgotten about it by Thursday, because the paradigm is simply, what can I do to own the libs? MSNBC is not a particularly, with all due respect to MSNBC, it's not the most successful legacy media outlet that is Fox. So it's not like MSNBC is having an outsized impact on political discourse. It's prominent, but it's certainly not Fox News. So think about it. We've also actually, by the way, heard, other right-wing conspiracy theorist billionaires like Bill Ackman say the same thing about Blue Sky, right? This idea that maybe somebody should buy MSNBC, maybe somebody should buy Blue Sky. It's not about free speech. It's not about a public town square. The right wing wants to control every outlet. And so let's say you see a mass exodus from Twitter onto Blue Sky, which there are numbers suggesting that that's what's happening. The Republicans are not content. MAGA is not content for you to have your own space or go to a different space. They don't even necessarily want to go there either. It's not like, oh, I'm going to this different part of the town square. Well, I want to have conversations with you, so I'm going there so we can have public debate. They want to own it. Luke, wherever you go, the Republicans don't just want to go there to talk with you. They want to own it, to dominate, to take the power away from you. It's this weird predatory instinct that I've never seen in the Democratic Party, but it is proliferating with Don Jr., Elon Musk, Bill Ackman, talking about buying up these left-wing spaces in order to deny platform power and a megaphone for the left. I'll also point out that there is credible evidence that Elon Musk has potentially artificially altered the algorithm of X to manufacture a signal boost, not only for himself, which has been talked about for quite some time. I'm referring to President Biden's, tweet about the Super Bowl, which reportedly got more engagement than Musk's, and Musk was pissed. And so he told his engineers, no, I have to have more than the President of the United States. Well, we're seeing that on steroids. Ever since he endorsed Donald Trump back in July, we've seen this boost on from Musk and right-wing accounts, which is seemingly inorganic and inexplicable unless there's, of course, an artificial component to it. This whole thing is incredibly disturbing, and it adds to the list of challenges, the ever-increasing list of challenges that you and I and liberals and progressives and Democrats have to face going into this next election. They are trying to exacerbate their many, many advantages, and we have to get very clever and very creative in order to prevent them from doing that.
Absolutely. Well put. Josiah, where can people find you?
They can find me at youtube.com/@ponderingpolitics, one word. I appreciate the collaboration, Luke, and I'm looking forward to another one.
Appreciate you.